Welcome to PeopleTools Tech Tips. I'm Randy Groncki. Today we're going to talk about the PeopleTools image utilities they forgot to give us. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about some PeopleSoft image utilities that I had to create myself because of requirements I had while on the job. These image utilities are all about user-uploaded images your users are putting into the application. Now, unfortunately, the PeopleTools functions allow us to upload them, allow us to define what they are as far as a JPEG, a PNG, or whatever by the image field type, and allow, if we want to crop and resize that image. However, we really never know anything about that image as far as how big it is. Is it portrait, landscape, and the dimensions about it? We also have other requirements about maybe pushing it out to file, and also changing the size while out in file, and maybe even changing the type, for example, from PNG to a JPEG. Well, why do we have these? Why did I go about these? Well, I had a requirement for a government agency to send images out to a combined catalog of multiple agencies of assets that the agency didn't need anymore. Imagine a desk. We don't need a desk anymore. Well, instead of throwing that desk out, they put it into this joint catalog, and maybe some other agency needs that desk and they can get it without buying a new desk. So the requirements around that, they wanted JPEG images, not PNGs or anything else, which is fine, but we had an entire collection of images before we started this that were many different types because they treated the images as attachments. They never uploaded it into the application so the user could see them. It was just an attachment, like a document attachment, a PDF or a Word doc or what have you. So we also built a new application that the users were allowed to upload the images of the assets before they sent out. So we had the challenges. Once the images were in PeopleSoft, inside that table with the image field, how do we push it back out the file so we can send it in an interface to somewhere else? Also, the requirements that said these images had to be in landscape dimension, not portrait. Okay, so they had to be wide, not tall. Also, they had to be a specific size. They couldn't be minimum size. They couldn't be too large. So we also had to be able to leverage all those thousands of images that were already uploaded and send them to without having this duplicative process. So that's where we come to today with these utilities. I've created an app package that's available out there on GitHub. All our objects here that you see today in the demo and this are out here on GitHub. You can download and use it yourself. Also on PeopleToolsTechTips.com, this entire tools project with the app packages out there for you. Now, what are we going to do for you today? We're going to move an image, a user uploaded image, from the database to a file. We're going to take that image into file and learn the dimensions of it. Let the operating system tell us what's the width and height of it. We're also going to be able to convert that image from one image type to another image type, in this case a PNG to a JPEG, and then we're also going to be able to resize it out there. So look below for the specific timings to go to the points you're concerned about most. Also, what we're not going to do, this is not going to be a step-by-step through everything on how to do it. It's more of an introduction to these methods and properties that get you all these things. Also, what we're using here today is to move the images to file attachment functions and to do this other manipulations of dimensions and conversions, and we're using Java objects inside of PeopleTools. This is not going to be a tutorial on how to use Java objects inside of PeopleTools, though we will briefly go through them. The bottom line is these are a working prototype for you to take and use inside of your implementation to change them and make them what you need. Am I a brilliant Java programmer? Not even in the close. But what we can do is go out there and find examples of what we need to do in Java and take those examples and apply them using the Java objects in PeopleCode and get these extra tools that we need through the PeopleTools framework. So, all available, PeopleToolsTechTips.com and GitHub for everything you're about to see here. Let's get started, and we're going to talk about moving a image from a PeopleTools table out to a file. We've uploaded this image inside a your PeopleSoft application. The user uploaded it. It's a desk, it's a picture, it's something. However, our requirements require that we need to know something about it. Also, we need to put it somewhere else, whether an interface somewhere, another application, or even maybe use it in a BI pub document, which is a later video. How do we get that image from PeopleSoft database out to a file so we can then do all those things we need? Well, what we're going to use is the file attachment functions. And you're going to say, well, it's not a file. No, it's not. What we're going to do is write a view over top of your table that holds your image. It then makes it appear like it's a attachment table, not an image table. So we're just going to use the file attachment subrecord onto a view, and inside that view, write SQL that lifts that record and puts the data into that view to make it appear to PeopleTools like it's attachment. Once PeopleTools thinks it's attachment, we can move that from the database out to a file and do other things with it. So let's look in more detail how we do that. This is a quick demo of our code in action. Add a new row to the image table and import a JPEG image into our table. You can see here that we have a large image of a broken laptop. This button will export the image to a file. A quick look at the target directory on our server. No image files are there. This is a view of the same directory through an application using a quick utility I developed to get log and other files. Again, no image files in the directory. Clicking the Export to File button copies the image out to the file server from the database. On the right side of the screen, we can find info such as the image dimensions and the file name. Refreshing the directory viewer shows the new file out in the Files directory. Clicking this icon throws the image to a Browser tab for viewing. Looking at our console now shows the file in that directory. The source file on my PC shows the image dimensions as 799 by 600 pixels. Our custom page shows the same dimensions for that image. Let's look at the objects and code behind moving that image to file. Here we see the database table containing the image. This is that same record definition in PeopleTools. We need to create this view of that table to make it appear as an attachment record instead of an image record. We'll use the file attachment subrecord for the fields. The magic happens in the SQL driving the view. This view is selecting a key and the image field from the source table. We're filling some of the other fields in with constants. This Oracle function will return the size of the object in bytes. Fill in the other fields with the sysdate and a constant for operator ID. Lastly, get the image field for the payload. Let's look at what that view returns. And there is our record appearing as an attachment table. I have component record field PeopleCode event calling the app package to move the object to the file server. We're importing and instantiating the Image Utility class. I'm creating the file name for the new image from the row's key value with a JPEG appended to the end. And here is where we are triggering the class method to move the image to file. Send image to file with name. The parameters are the table view we just looked at, the key to the image on the table, and the file name where we want to place it. The method returns the fully qualified URL of the image file on the server. Here's the method to send the image to the file server. We can see the method's parameters of the source view, image key, and target file name. Here we are generating a fully qualified URL on the file server in the default file location. The file object's name property returns a fully qualified URL to the object. We are saving that for later use in the method. This is the getAttachment function where we're using the parameters and generating a file name. This is moving the image from the database table to the file server. And the fully qualified URL to that new file is returned as a string. Okay, so we have our image out to a file. The next logical thing is, How big is the attachment that they just sent us? Is it portrait? Is it landscape? How big is it? Did they just upload this huge, gigantic image to us, or did they give us something the size of a postage stamp? Well, until we know that, we can't really understand to do anything with that image. Maybe you want to have requirements that the image must be a minimum height width or a maximum height width or in between. And what we do is we load it up, send it out the file, find the dimensions, and then we can report back to the user pretty much instantaneously and saying, this is the height and width, and then knowing that, what do we do next? Okay, so we're going to use that same example that we did. We uploaded it, and now we're going to see how we got those dimensions using the Java objects, Java file objects and Java buffered image to find all that information about that image file and bring it into PeopleSoft and display it on the page. Here we see the same component record field people code where we copied the file out from the database to the file server. Using the fully qualified URL returned from our sendImageToFile method, we invoke the genImageDimensions method to load the height and width properties of the object. We then just set the height and width fields on the page to the corresponding object values. Let's look at the genImageDimensions class method. You can see here the only parameter is the file's fully qualified URL. Java objects are used to load Java's buffered image objects, whose properties will then tell us the image's width and height. The method doesn't return a value, rather sets class variables to the corresponding values. The image height and image width properties are getters that return these variables. Our next requirement was converting an image file from one type to another, whether it's a JPEG to something else, a PNG to JPEG, or name your types. What's important here is that in our application we had to work with, we had this vast number of objects, these image files, and we needed to only send them to this destination as a JPEG, not as a PNG, not as a BMP or whatever else they uploaded. So we can use, again, the buffered image, Java buffered image object, and convert that image from one type to another. Now, in this case, what we're going to do is upload a PNG using the file attachment functions to our file server. And then once it's there, we're going to then convert that from the PNG to a JPEG. So things to watch out. PNGs can have transparencies, JPEGs cannot. Here we change our demo page for the next demo to convert an image file. For the sake of speed, we're just going to put a PNG file out to the file server as an attachment. We see here the fully qualified URL to that PNG image we just put out to the file server. Refreshing the directory view, we can see the new PNG file on the server. And here's a quick view of our PNG image. Clicking the Convert File Type button will create a new file of the same image in JPEG format. You can see here in the scroll area at the bottom the file name and path of the new JPEG file. Refreshing the directory view of the file server and we see the new JPEG image. Clicking on the View button shows us the new JPEG image looking exactly like the source PNG image. Here's the code to move the image to the file server as an attachment. If I don't have a specific defined location for the new file, I use the file object and the default file director to create a fully qualified URL for the new file. I'm then using the ThinkTime function of add attachment to move the file from my local directory to a temporary attachment record on the database. I then use the getAttachment function to move the file from the attachment record to the file server using the fully qualified file name and path created above. Here is the component record field people code that uses the Image Utilities app class to convert the PNG file to a JPEG file. Import and instantiate the app class. There are no parameters. The convert to JPEG with trans method takes the source file as a parameter and returns a string with the fully qualified URL to the new converted file. I'm using the fully qualified URL from the attachment process as the source file URL. Let's look at the convert JPEG with trans class method to see how it's converting the PNG to a JPEG. First thing it does is break down the source file's name, stripping the last three characters of the file type from the source file and appending JPEG to create a fully qualified URL for the new resulting file. We are then using the Java object to invoke Java file and image objects. We are loading the source PNG file into the Java buffered image object. To handle any transparencies the source PNG file may have, we need to paint the image on a new canvas with a defined background color. We create a Java object to hold the Java color class so we can define most any color we want as the background. Then we define a new Java object as a new image with the same dimensions as the source image. The create graphics of the new image uses the source image to paint the new image with the color class as our background color. The new buffered image object is then written to the target file. The URL of the new JPEG image is returned to the calling event. The last thing we're going to talk about is resizing an image file. So we have this image up inside of PeopleSoft and we threw it out the file, or it existed there already. Now, wherever it's going to go to, maybe we don't want the image that the user uploaded that's a couple thousand wide by a couple thousand tall and it's the size of the earth. We need a specific size. We can resize that image to the image we need. Now, we'll need a couple things. We need to know the existing dimensions before we move it to the new dimensions. Be careful here, because when you resize it to the dimensions, if you don't do the new size in the same aspect as the old size, you will skew the image. And if you skew the image enough, it won't be recognizable to the user. Also, shrinking down an image works a whole lot better than expanding up an image. If you take a small image the size of a postage stamp and expand it much, much larger, you get a blocky, almost unrecognizable image depending on how large you made it. However, taking a larger image and making it smaller often works better unless you're making it so small you removed all the detail. So let's look at resizing an image that's on the file server. We're going to resize the JPEG image file we just created in that last demo. Here we have the URL to that new JPEG image we created from the PNG. Clicking the Resize button scales up the image in that URL by 25%. The resulting new file URL is placed on the scroll box below the original image URL. Refreshing the log file utility shows the new scaled up image file. Click on the view icon shows the new larger image. This is a view of the original image. Moving between images, we can see that the new image is larger than the original. This is the component record field people code invoking the resize method. We import and instantiate the Image Utilities app class and assign work records on the page to record object variables. Since this method uses a parameter for the file path and a parameter for the file name, this section is just breaking down the target image URL by the file path and name. The first thing we need to do before creating a new resized image is to determine the height and width of the source image. We use the getImageDimensions method on the source file to load those values into the object. To scale up the image, we are multiplying the source height and width by 1.25. The new image will have the same aspect ratio as the source image. Again, there is an opportunity to skew the new image if we don't get dimensions correct here. Here we are invoking the resize image method. The first two parameters are the source file name and path. The third and fourth parameters are the new image width and height. The method returns a URL in string form as a result. Let's look at the resize image file method in the app class. We can see here the parameters and the return string. The first thing the method does is generates a file name for the new scaled image. You can see here we're appending a underscale to the source file name. The meat of this method is using the Java object to leverage Java's buffered image object. Java objects are used to load the source file for the resize. Then a new buffered image object is created for the new scaled file. The createGraphics class of the new image object is used to draw the image to the new height and width using the source image. Finish up by running that new buffered image to file in JPEG format. This method returns the new scaled file's fully qualified URL as a string. Now we've made these image utilities using the Java objects and also the attachment objects, but particularly the Java objects. I have a few here and they're not great bastions or examples of Java coding. You can go out and find whatever you need to do inside those images on the file out there in Java. Just Google how to do it in Java, find the Java examples, and translate them inside of People code using the Java objects. Most time there is a way to get it done. You don't have to be original. You don't have to be a fantastic Java programmer. That's what I've done here. Take these classes, take this class, take these methods, use them how you will, modify them to work in your environment. Maybe even modify them to work even better. These work for me in my implementation of what I needed. Send them back to us if you have a better, more refined things. Add more capabilities to them for whatever we need with these user images. That's all for now. Thanks for watching. Please consider subscribing, and we'll see you next time here on PeopleTools Tech Tips.